The holy founder of the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary of the Passion contributed 7 of her young nuns to the Shanxi mission. This small band of sisters left an indelible mark on the lives of many people in Shanxi before they too were martyred at Governor Yuxian's palace. The local Catholics were astonished to see Fogela, Dongbo Di, and the group of foreign women arrive. The nuns were a spectacle with their large feet. The nuns, clad in their long white habits, left for China on March 12, 1899. One source recounts that stormy weather gave them a rough sea and all were seasick. They were tossed to and fro in their berths. They reached Hong Kong in April, and after a short stay there with the Sisters of St. Paul, they left again for Taiyuan. At last, the days of voyage on land and sea were past, and on the feast of the great Saint Monica, whom the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary liked so much to venerate in their convent at Carthage, the 7 future martyrs entered Taiyuan, where 200 orphans and 6 Franciscan fathers awaited their arrival. Their new home was much more modest than they were accustomed to in France, but the austerity of their lodgings was made up for by the enthusiasm with which they were greeted when they arrived. In a letter home, Sister Marie Amandine wrote, "I cannot describe to you the warmth of the welcome these poor souls give us. Women and children would not be satisfied till they had touched our hands, our habits, even our feet, so surprisingly long to them." The 7 were overwhelmed, looking after the children under their care at the mission orphanage, and caring for the constant flow of patients at their small clinic. What time they had left was spent between the 2 chapels nestled within the Franciscan mission. Every morning they attended Mass at 5 o'clock at one chapel, and at the other chapel they kept vigil before Jesus in daily adoration. Growing hunger in Shanxi demanded their attention as a drought began to cause starvation and restlessness. One sister wrote, "We made a triduum of prayer to obtain rain, since drought had brought hunger in its wake. We organized everything so that day and night an FMM was at the feet of Jesus in the Eucharist. To do that, each of us made 3 or 4 hour adorations and gave up midday recreation to go to the chapel. The Chinese women, young and old, remained kneeling with hands joined and prayed with much fervor." By April and May, northern China was teeming with anti-Christian Boxers, and the sisters began to fear that their own work in Taiyuan would soon end, probably with their own deaths. As the Boxers approached the city, Bishops Grassi and Fogela asked Governor Yuxian for an audience. They hoped he would offer to help them escape from a Boxer attack. Of course, he refused to meet them because he was, as we now know, in collaboration with the very Boxers the Franciscans feared. One of the nuns, Sister Marie Amandine, wrote a letter to her parents on January 24th, 1900. She said, "The revolutionaries are still 3 days' journey from here. They say that the Emperor of China is not going to interfere if all the Europeans are killed. Before you get this letter, we may have been driven out or even put to death." Each day, the Boxers grew closer, and Fogela and Grassi pleaded with the 7 Franciscan nuns to flee Taiyuan and find safety elsewhere. But this was not what they desired. Mother Marie Amandine refused to deport the nuns and leave, and she simply responded to the 2 bishops, "Do not stop us from dying with you." In May 1900, a Chinese traveler passed through Taiyuan and warned the Franciscans that a Catholic church had been attacked and burned to the ground only a few days away. The local authorities sent notice to Bishop Grassi that all Christians must convene at their church, where officials would give them a final chance to renounce their faith. Grassi did call everyone to church, not to apostatize, however, but to pray. One of the holy priests who was gathered then was Father Theodoric Balat, who had arrived to China on October of 1884. Balat was not healthy in China, and he sometimes collapsed from severe spasms and fevers. Despite his frailty, Father Theodoric taught at the Franciscan Seminary at Dongargo and served as the chaplain for the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary. Other than Balat, one of the most beloved members of the Taiyuan mission was Elias Ficini. Father Ficini was perhaps the most learned member of the Franciscan mission in all of China. He wrote distinguished works on philosophy, theology, and Catholic devotional life, and he produced a Latin-Chinese dictionary to help the Chinese seminarians to prepare for the priesthood. Elias suffered from a painful skin disease and usually slept no more than 4 hours a night because of his discomfort. The Alsatian seminarian Andre Bauer gathered also that day in the mission chapel. Andre had served in the French military for 3 years, and he understood too well what violence awaited them once the Boxers were in Taiyuan. Bauer had arrived at Taiyuan on May 4th, 1899, and Bishop Grassi assigned him to care for patients in the medical clinic and to oversee the lay workers at the mission. Andre Bauer was a close friend of Dong Bo-di, who he attended classes with at the Franciscan Seminary in the Catholic village of Dongargo. One source tells us that Bauer and Dong Bo-di encouraged the Chinese Christians to remain firm in their faith as they faced persecution. "Let us not lose this wonderful opportunity to be martyred," said Dong, "and ascend to heaven." Bishop Fogela urged Bauer, Dong, and all the seminarians to find hiding places as the Boxers approached Taiyuan, but they refused to abandon their chance for martyrdom. The bishops, priests, and seminarians, the nuns, and lay faithful had all gathered together on July 2nd. It was their final moment of freedom. That afternoon, Yuxian soldiers broke into the chapel and seized them, taking them to Pighead Alley, where they were locked in a railway office. On the 9th of July, Governor Yuxian commanded his troops to convene with a large band of newly arrived Boxers at the west gate of his official palace, and he summoned the missionaries to his gate. By this time, both Catholic and Protestant missionaries had been gathered together in preparation for this massacre. The prisoners were stripped to the waist, men, women, and children, and paraded through the public streets toward the gate, where Yu Shen sat on a platform, surrounded by soldiers and an entourage of motley young Boxers wielding menacing swords and long spears. On the way to the governor's palace through their Via Crucis, the native Christians and foreign missionaries were bound in ropes, ridiculed and beaten by their guards. Bishop Fogela told the troops that they were quite willing to follow them without the ropes, but as he suggested this, a soldier slashed the poor bishop's leg with his sword. Grassi also endured beatings as he marched to the execution ground. He suffered a deep wound on the forehead and a sword cut on his shoulders. Once at the West Gate, the group of terrified Christians were ordered to kneel. Professor Georges Goyot, a historian at the Académie Française, has described what followed. He wrote, "In a harsh voice, Yu Shen ordered the yard to be cleared and the prisoners were dragged out to the tribunal. The people hurling insults at them as they passed down the streets. Yu Shen did not even pretend to hold a trial. He himself gave the order to kill and dealt the death blow to 2 bishops with his own sword. On their knees, the nuns sang the Te Deum as they knelt with heads bowed to the executioner. They were very tranquil. Some non-Christian spectators said afterwards, they lifted their veils for the death blow and added, 'It is a shame. These European nuns were such good people.'" Father Balat's assistant witnessed the entire event and was able to provide a written testimony of what happened. He wrote, "Kill them! Kill them!" roared the crowd. Yu Shen, striking with his own sword, cried, "Kill them!" At this site, the soldiers began the slaughter, dealing blows right and left, cruelly injuring their victims before giving the final stroke. Father Elias, aged 61 years, received more than 100 sword cuts. At each blow, he lifted his eyes to heaven, saying, "I go to heaven." During the scene, the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary were spectators, for their executioners hoped the sight of the martyred priests would make their own death more horrible. They knelt in prayer with their eyes lifted to heaven, praying for the martyrs, for the conversion of their persecutors, and for the perseverance of Christians. The nuns embraced each other, intoned the Te Deum, and presented their heads to the executioners. A stroke of the sword, and all was over. Father Li Wenyu simply stated, "In a moment the blood gathered into flowing rivers, and countless corpses were prone throughout the courtyard." It didn't take long for news of this terrible massacre to reach Rome, and Pope Leo XIII's private secretary, Monsignor Rinaldo Angeli, wrote to Mother Mary of the Passion, the founder of the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary, on behalf of the Pope. He wrote, "His Holiness blesses with all his heart the institute which has given these spotless victims. I rejoice with you in this new pledge of heavenly graces given to your society, the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary." They had their first martyrs. Witnesses of the executions reported a radiant light bursting from the sky that shone on the bodies of the martyrs. And a column was described that appeared and ascended into the sky. Later reports noted that white clouds descended from the sky into the remains of the martyrs when their bodies were buried. It was very curious when 9 months after the massacre at Taiyuan, Mother Mary of the Passion received an unexpected package in the mail containing 3 long-delayed letters written by Mother Marie Amandine before she was killed in China. Her letters were laden with anxiety, but despite her fears, the nuns continued to offer their work to God and to the people of the Middle Kingdom. She wrote, "Drought growing worse every day, groups of people hurling threats against Christians, against friends of the Europeans whom they blame for the scourge. At the same time, more and more of the wretched people, they come to St. Pascal's convent, and there is the terrible problem of how to feed the babies living with their foster mothers when they should be brought back. Typhoid is raging, and everyday news of the advance of the Boxer rebels becomes more upsetting. They are cutting telegraph wires, destroying the railways, blocking up the roads. The nuns are more and more isolated. In spite of all this, work goes on." The Franciscans in Taiyuan lived according to the ideals of St. Francis, no matter what the cost. The first time Mother Mary of the Passion heard that her 7 nuns had died was on September 22nd, 1900. It was announced in a note from the Franciscan Father General. He wrote, "On behalf of our Father General, I hasten to send you the news. The glory of those victims who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and now are part of this triumphal army. A sorrow to us who have lost friends, bishops, and exemplary missionaries. Let us pray for them and copy them. Our most reverend Father General sends you his condolences and his congratulations too for the first 7 martyrs of your institute." Mother Mary walked into the chapel, and after a moment of silence, she called all of the sisters at St. Helen's Convent together. They gathered, and she said to them, "My children, God gave to St. Francis the grace of having 5 of his sons martyred, and in his joy he cried out, 'Now I can truly say I have true friars minor.' And I too can truly say I have 7 Franciscan Missionaries of Mary." St. Pascal Bellon's convent at Taiyuan has been destroyed. Mother Hermine and all our sisters have been put to death. They are my 7 sorrows and my 7 joys. She was alluding to the 7 sorrows of the Blessed Virgin Mary related to the life of her son Jesus. It is a profound mystery of our Christian faith that the sorrows of such suffering are inexorably linked to the joyful hope of the resurrection. Mother Mary of the Passion, the founder of the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary, understood this well when she asked her nuns to thank the good Lord for the sacrifice these Franciscans had made for the Middle Kingdom. They sang together there in the room the same Te Deum that the 7 sisters had sung together as they died martyrs on the soil of China.